From the 90s to the 2000s, there was a heavy emphasis on comic book films being cooler and more profound. There were outliers to this, like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and Ang Lee's Hulk. Still, there was a general shift in movie studios' perceptions of comic book IPs, as creatives fought for the general public to view superhero media as serious mediums for storytelling. X-Men was one of the films leading this charge for public recognition, and director Bryan Singer and everyone working on the X-Men film used their creativity to figure out how to make these characters work in a profound and grounded setting, a battle that required the revamping of the X-Men's most iconic designs, such as the Wolverine. Speaking of the Wolverine as a character, this month you can unlock him in Marvel Strike Force, the sponsor of this video. Marvel Strike Force is a mobile squad RPG that allows you to play and battle with your favorite team of Marvel heroes and villains in a struggle to save the universe from various powerful threats. In this game, you'll recruit heroes and villains you know and love like Iron Man, Wolverine, Venom, and many others from the Marvel Universe. Power them up to their strongest using different methods of character progression, and engage in missions such as campaigns, arenas, and blitz. I love many things about the game, especially the dynamic and cinematic RPG systems, as your characters employ a series of awesome combo moves with a single tap. However, as you all know, I'm a sucker for visuals, and luckily for a mobile game, Marvel Strike Force has impressive visuals with stunning graphics, especially the in-game environments and the animations and visual effects present in characters like Thanos, which once again adds to the cinematic feel of the game. Fresh methods for strategizing with your lineup emerge frequently. This is due to the continuous influx of characters from Marvel movies, TV shows, and comics, guaranteeing an endless array of unique experiences to enjoy within the game. Join Marvel Strike Force today by clicking on the link in the description or scanning the QR code and using the promo code Logan within the game to unlock Wolverine for free, 500 power cores, and 5 premium orbs. Instructions on redeeming the code will be provided through a link in the description. Also, for a limited time this month, you can use the QR code or the link in the description to unlock Marvel's LGBTQ heroes, Korg and America Chavez. Thank you to Marvel Strike Force for sponsoring this video.
Yeah, Brian had very specific requirements, and he wanted to keep everything as natural as humanly possible. He didn't want to go over the top with anything. So we tried to keep it as realistic as humanly possible. But that's I kind of specialize in that kind of thing. So I was very glad that he wanted to keep it as realistically as possible.
Imagine living in the mid-90s and you notice a shift within Hollywood. Suddenly, there's a growing embrace of more mature and complex comic book adaptations. While there are still some lighthearted films, as the 2000s approach, studios, writers, and directors are increasingly drawn to the serious side of comic book adaptations. Comic book IPs are becoming the new blockbuster goldmine. Yet, there's a dilemma. Many people view comic books as juvenile, simple stories for children. For years, superhero projects catered to this perception, but for studios and creators, if they wanted superhero adaptations to be taken seriously by the general public, it was time to infuse them with realism, treating these characters and worlds as if they were a part of our own reality. Bryan Singer was one of these directors. At the time, he wasn't much of a comic book reader. When he came onto the X-Men project, he became intrigued by the stories, social commentary, and characters. He loved the messaging of the comics and felt that in the political world they lived in at the time, X-Men was a great story and medium to address these social issues while still telling a gripping and action-filled narrative. However, there was a clear sense of reluctance from Bryan Singer when it came to adapting the X-Men comics outright. He respected the themes and stories the comics were trying to tell, but perhaps he felt a tonal whiplash between the intended messaging of the comics and the bright and colorful art style. So Bryan Singer wanted to take the X-Men seriously when he brought them over to the big screen. And often, when a director says a statement like this, it usually means that they want to take a comic book character and translate them into a real-world context. And that's exactly what Bryan Singer's goal was, as his X-Men film was set in a world that reflected our own, a contemporary society stricken by political turmoil. When you take a look at the original X-Men costumes dating back to the early 60s, they were very simple to say the least. The costumes primarily consisted of two components: the full-body blue suit that covered even their head, and a yellow component that went over the blue suit, consisting of gloves, boots, and a central chest piece. The costumes of the X-Men are visibly vibrant and eye-catching, with bright colors that inspire positivity and an aura of fun from the characters. The costumes in this era looked identical to each other, with only small character details like body type and accessories to help us tell them apart. The identical appearance of the X-Men makes sense, considering that they had to inspire cooperation and a feeling of belonging from each other, a sign of acceptance that they were all a part of a particular group. The homogeny of the X-Men costumes were a great tool for the narratives at the time. However, as time progressed, the identical nature of the X-Men suits would begin to evolve as comic creators would begin to shift into a different approach to these characters' looks. Come the late 60s and the early 90s, the X-Men began to take on more diverse designs. Their costumes were a bit different from the traditional superhero suits, as they still managed to keep a sense of unity with the other X-Men, but at the same time, they had their own form of individuality, especially the 90s costumes, which, although paid respects to the characters' original roots, had distinct designs that are regarded as the most iconic X-Men looks to date. These designs for the X-Men were the most popular at the time, leading up to the development of the first movie. However, despite the more diverse, mature, and serious looks these versions of the characters possessed, there was still a reluctance to develop them onto the big screen, but not by a lack of trying. These conceptual drawings, done by artist Tim Flattery, represent the oldest artworks done for the film. As you can see, they look pretty different from the characters' traditional looks, trying to fit in with the grounded vision Bryan Singer imagined, but there's still an embrace of the colorful costuming you'd see from the comics as well, creating a unique and fun balance of the two. When you compare Wolverine to his original comic look, he maintains the yellow suit we've become accustomed to, but there's still a lot of differences worth mentioning. The blue secondary color we traditionally see from the character is now missing, replaced by a more reddish brown, although it's worth mentioning that this color has been used in several iterations of the character. We generally see more of the suit covering his body, as he's devoid of the sleeveless look we've become accustomed to. The shoulder guards are also missing, and the belt is more like an outline on the suit, with a large red X in the middle. The most noticeable part of the suit is the lack of a mask, which covers the sides of Wolverine's face, with his wild and long hair jutting out. Cyclops generally also has a pretty distinct look, although it changes completely depending on the world and artists. Generally, this is his most iconic look, consisting of a blue bodysuit with a plethora of yellow fastenings, straps, and other yellow accessories like his visor. When you take a look at Tim Flattery's artwork, you can tell that he tried to translate a lot of elements of his original design. The bodysuit harkens back to his original X-Men suit. However, this suit is much more metallic, with a plethora of metal patterning the central yellow section and the red color taking up some portions of the suit, adding visual variety to the appearance, which allows Cyclops here to look like a strange sci-fi reimagining of his original comic design, which would have worked really well in a contemporary and grounded world. Unlike a lot of X-Men characters who, although get redesigns, generally don't stray far from their looks, Jean Grey is not one of those characters. Although her most popular look consists of a green dress with gold accessories, her look changes so often in the comics that we can't really nail down one distinctive visual language for the character. Perhaps that's why in her conceptual artwork, she pretty much looks similar to Cyclops, but with red instead of blue, which almost acts as an inverse of Cyclops' character. Her hair is also blonde, which is interesting considering that she's famously known as a redhead. Interestingly, Jean Grey also possesses a series of other conceptual artwork that play around with her design. Some look more visually distinct, while others just play around with the colors and design of her costume, letting her look more visually distinct from Cyclops. Mystique is not particularly a hard character to design. She has a pretty distinct look after all, with blue skin and yellow eyes. In the comics, she also dons a white dress with skulls adorning it. Overall, her appearance is pretty simple, which ultimately translated pretty well into the movies, but with a few creative changes. For one thing, Mystique does not have perfect blue skin and actually possesses a series of scales like a snake, which flex like a unique contraption to make her shapeshifting more interesting, instead of just simple morphs like in the animated series. This cool approach to her transformations is the one benefit of setting the film in a more realistic setting. This snake-like approach to her skin was much more extreme in the early concept art, as Mystique here takes on a more snake-like appearance, appearing like a cobra with her hair and eyes, leaning into the idea of Mystique being a woman of betrayal and trickery. This snake-like approach to Mystique's skin is the only piece of concept art that carried over into the final film. This animal influence also extends to other concepts, such as this one, where Mystique takes on a more aquatic and fish-like look. The other character who more or less embraces a form of their original look is Magneto. While Magneto in the comics typically dons a red bodysuit with purple accessories, especially his metallic collar, which his cape attaches to, and his distinct and iconic helmet. The one in the final film wears a black outfit with red accessories, but still maintains that iconic helmet. However, there was attempts to make him look similar to his original comic appearance, according to this art, which once again takes the comic look and adds extra details to allow them to work in a more grounded world. Supposedly, the character Beast was also present in the early concept art, and overall, it's safe to say that there was at least attempts to stay true to how these characters look within the source material.
And that was the key thing, was not to make them look like they were running around in yellow spandex or blue spandex, but to keep it real.
I think Brian's intention, when we're trying to follow through on this, is to create these characters and these powers as if they could really happen in our world today.
Prove it.
So one of the reasons they don't run around in say, the comic book outfits of a bright yellow bodysuit is that might be kind of goofy today and would be not very realistic.
It's not entirely clear why this happened, but eventually the creative team decided to have the X-Men have a homogeneous look when it came to their costumes, meaning they would all have the same kind of similar appearance, just like the original comics. So unfortunately, these designs would go unused. The colorful costume design was great and all, But consider the time period we're in. It's the late 90s, and at this point in time, sleek black outfits were now all the rage, made popular by films like The Matrix and Blade. Not only did black outfits look cool, but were also perfect for the more darker and serious world Singer had envisioned, and with a few visual touches, they'd work perfectly for the world of the X-Men. It's now at this point that you begin to see the X-Men take on more realistic costumes made up of darker contrasting colors to fit in with this world. For Storm, I wouldn't really say she looks that different from her traditional appearance. There are a lot of adaptations where she takes on a white costume, but in some adaptations as well, she primarily wears black. However, this concept of her suit still looks quite different than we're used to, now donning a red and blue half-and-half suit with patterning, flowing, and connecting to a cape-like structure on her back. What's interesting is that despite the embrace of darker costumes, the characters still had a semblance to their original looks. Wolverine, for example, dons a black and blue suit, and most interestingly, possesses his iconic mask that looks a bit different than we're used to. It seems in an effort to allow the suit to work within this grounded world, the mask has become a bit less exaggerated than the comic version, possessing a tamer and what do you even call this? Possessing a tamer eye mustache and a sharp back section. This Wolverine art is essentially the perfect compromise between the comic book look and a realistic redesign that fits within a grounded world. However, this look would go unused. It's not entirely clear why. However, perhaps Singer wanted the suits to make more practical sense, as he truly believed in practicality and how things would realistically behave and look in our world. So perhaps he felt that the Wolverine possessing such a distinct costume would not make sense. It's here when you see the costumes begin to take on a very particular kind of look, which is shown in this concept art of Cyclops. Cyclops now wears a full black leather outfit with distinct patterning and a yellow X-Men symbol. Now this concept art may look familiar, as this is basically what the suits would end up looking like in the final film, and every member of the X-Men would don a version of this basic suit.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
It was my response to a lot of internet complaining about the lack of spandex multicolored costumes, which we tried.
It seems Bryan Singer had successfully translated the X-Men to the big screen. The suits themselves aren't particularly memorable or, visually distinct when you compare them to how they look in the comics. However, there's still a small attempt to give them their own unique and colorful details to add individuality to every suit. Now clearly, there was a lot of passion put into the original X-Men film. This is without saying, and at the time of the film's creation, it was a film that required changes, as the creators involved truly wanted these characters to be as beloved by the general public as many fans of the comics. This did mean that the designs fans had come to love would be gone, but in its place, we received one of the most iconic superhero films of the early 2000s. Thank you for watching this video, and as a reminder, download Marvel Strike Force today by using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code. Anyways, I'll see you next time.